Here, I'm talking about how does this apply to your day-to-day living. Number one, understand this, that you're not going to understand everything. This truth he's sharing with these men here in verses 16 through 18, and I won't read it again because we've already read it twice. This truth he's sharing with them at that time is a little bit ambiguous. They're like, what's all this little while business? We don't know what, Lord, you're saying a little while this and a little while that, and here a little, there a little, everywhere a little while. What do you mean? They didn't understand. And can I say for you and I this morning, the reason they didn't understand is because they could only see what was right before them. They could not see what was right down the road. Jesus had been telling them for years, you don't understand, they're going to crucify me, but on the third day, destroy this temple. I'll raise it again. He said, the third day. They should have knew, but they couldn't see it with their eyes, and so therefore they were still struggling with it. Can I say this about mine and your life? There's going to be a lot of things about our lives that we just don't understand everything about. You're going to go through stuff from time to time, and you may even have a Bible verse. They did, but they didn't understand it. They didn't understand how it was all going to play out. They couldn't see the next day around the corner. They couldn't see 6 months from now where they may be. And so they're stuck in a state of sadness now and sorrow, and they did not understand that gladness was right around the corner. And can I say this? Because you and I don't know what's on tomorrow, we may not understand that the state you're in now can change by then. Sadness to gladness. I'll give you some biblical examples. I think about over in the book of Genesis, there was a young man by the name of Joseph. And in Genesis chapter number 37, verses 5 through 7, you and I know this, that God had gave Joseph a dream. And he shared that dream with his brothers. And in the dream, Joseph told his brothers, he said, we were all out in the field gathering the sheaves. And he said, in my dream, my sheaf rose up and stood, and yours all stood around it and did obeisance to me. In other words, what he was saying is that I've had a dream that one day I'm going to be in charge. Now, they didn't take that well. They were brothers and they were Baptists. And though he had this dream that was going to bring him a lot of anticipation and probably a lot of joy and happiness in his life, it quickly turned to sadness. Because the events that followed the dream were not that his family embraced him and said, Joseph, we're so happy for you that God has chosen this lot in your life, and we're going to play along, and we're going to let you lead the pack. That's not what they said. As a matter of fact, what happens next in his life after the dream was his brothers fake his death and sell him into slavery. He gets carried down eventually and dropped off into Egypt, where after finding himself in Potiphar's house, I guess you could say one of the higher up there in the land, he gets falsely accused of doing something he shouldn't have done, and he's imprisoned. Now, if I'm in prison, sold, my dad thinks I'm dead, I don't know about you, but I'm not glad, now I'm sad. From there, he interprets a dream that some buddies that he has in jail get out of jail on, and he's the one that told him what the dream actually meant that Pharaoh had, and they never told Pharaoh where they got their information. They just took credit for interpreting the dream. They get out, he stays in. Well, later on, they got to interpret another dream. They ain't doing too good. One of them loses his head over it, and before the other guy loses his, he says, oh, hang on a second. I know a guy down in cell 13 who can help me with this. They go down there, and they get Joseph to interpret the dream, and that gets him out and gets him some favor with Pharaoh, and Pharaoh sees his wisdom. He interprets more dreams. Next thing you know, he gets promoted up through the ranks, and by the time it's all said and done, you and I know the story well. There is Joseph perfectly positioned in the middle of a famine to save the life of his family. And that day, whenever he was reintroduced to his brothers, when they come from afar to get grain to survive and what have you there, he remembered, and here's how bad it can get sometimes. He was so far removed, let me give you this, 20 years from the time he had the dream till he saw it fulfilled. And during that time, he did not understand everything from point A to point B. And in mine and your life, I'm going to tell you this, there's going to be a lot of times where God's got an expected end or goal where he wants to get us to, and you're going to go through things in those seasons of life. You'll never see them coming. You'll not even understand what you're going through or why. And sometimes when you're stuck in a state of sadness, when you're in the middle of that prison, or whenever you've been sold out by those who love you, you can get pretty dark in despair. But in Joseph's case, it doesn't end up dying in sadness. He goes from sadness to gladness. It ends up exactly the way the Lord had told him that it would, and he had even forgot. He'd gotten so far removed. The Bible says in Genesis chapter 42, verse 9, that he remembered the dream that he dreamed. I believe he had been so long in this new season of life that he didn't even, he gave up hope on it probably. He remembers it later, and later on what God told him.